from the heart of the city too busy to hate. A progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening. Whether it's on Georgia Now, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m., the replay 8 to 10 a.m. the following morning, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. My guest today, Emily Wu Pearson from WABE. Her investigative series, Detained in Georgia, focusing on the immigrant detention industry in rural Georgia and the impacts it has on the community that, in particular, she's focused on, Lumpkin, Georgia, down in Stewart County, near the Alabama state line. What, if any, benefit does that community see from having a facility like that there? What do the folks who live there, who tend to vote Democrat, feel? How do they feel about having an immigrant detention facility there? What sort of impact does it have on the attorneys that try to help assist with those in detention, those that can get attorneys to assist them anyway, et cetera and so on? Fascinating, in-depth conversation. That'll be in the first hour. Second hour, we will talk with Mark Matthews from the National Retail Federation, who was part of a consortium of conversations yesterday at the 2026 Georgia Economic Outlook presentation in Atlanta. In fact, I'm going to read to you from that piece Maya Holman filed at the Georgia Recorder on that. Economists offering a sobering forecast for 2026, marking the second consecutive year of slowed growth across both Georgia and the United States at large. The state's economy is projected to grow 1.5% into 2026, only marginally better than the 1.3% growth expected nationally, according to economists at the University of Georgia. She continues, during a 2026 Georgia Economic Outlook presentation in downtown Atlanta Wednesday, interim Terry College of Business Dean Santanu Chatterjee told business leaders that Georgia's economy grew by roughly 3% in 2025. So if you feel like the economy's been sort of like in 2025, it'll be half that in 2026, according to economists. I mean, they could be wrong. They could be completely wrong. But all the writing's on the wall. We are seeing right now in the U.S. Senate, they are struggling to come to a consensus on Affordable Care Act subsidies. We're about to see health insurance premiums skyrocket for hundreds of thousands here just in Georgia, millions across the country. Student loan debt forgiveness, that's going away. The Biden-era policy that was helping some folks who needed the delay or the forgiveness on their student loans, that's coming back onto household budgets, along with some of those same households, those ACA subsidies, bringing their premiums up. I mean, if consumers have less to spend, a lot less to spend, well, the economy's not going to do well. So anyway, where was I? Oh, heading into 2026, according to Maya Holman, Dean Santanu Chatterjee said, growth will be slower as a result of uncertainty around trade policies, tariffs, slowing population growth. Actually, we're seeing an impact in population from, again, the ICE detentions and the self-deportation movement. Labor force declines, see immigration, deportation, and slower national economic growth. I mean, who could have foreseen all this coming, right? Except those of us who were talking about all of this coming to a head in 2024 during the election cycle. Anyway, Maya Holman again. Unemployment also expected to be on the rise, with Georgia's rates estimated to climb to 4.1%, an increase of 0.5 percentage point. National unemployment is expected to sit at 4.7%, up from the current 4.4%. Inflation expected to hover around 3.5%. Up from 3% in September. As with last year's prediction, Georgia is expected to have a stronger economy than the U.S. as a whole, but the state's economy is still predicted to struggle. Nationally, the U.S. faces a 49% risk of recession. Oh, man, they loved using that word during the Biden presidency. Oh, my God. Everybody was predicting it back then. Oh, it's definitely going to happen. Oh, it's definitely going to. It never came to be. I mean, think back all you will about the Biden presidency and the economic issues that we dealt with inflation, which, again, I will point out was worse throughout the rest of the world than it was in the United States. There were very few countries that had inflation at the levels that we did. Because, again, we had a steady hand. Maybe not necessarily just in the Oval Office, but in that administration. It's like you're flying a plane, you know it's damaged, but you got to get it down. You're not going to score an A+ on the landing, right? But did you land? Did everybody get off the plane? back to Maya Holman. Georgia has a few protective factors that make its economy more resilient than the U.S. as a whole. Although I must point out, Atlanta is sort of the opposite of that. We have seen here in Metro Atlanta, which was just a bull rush, spot for entertainment filming, that has cooled considerably around here. And by the way, forgive me if I get a cough or something. I'm fighting something that I've been dealing with since Tuesday, and I think I've turned the corner. You just never know, right? Anyway, Santanu Chatterjee said that Georgia has a few protective factors that make its economy more resilient than the U.S. Existing economic development projects from companies like Energy Tech Corporation, TriNet, JS Link America will continue to ramp up production. I mean, he didn't even mention a lot of the green energy initiative. Oh, that's right, the Trump administration. However, Governor Brian Kemp, he's been really bullish on making sure that we follow through here in the state of Georgia on those initiatives as much as is possible, because it's good for the local economy. Back to Maya Holman's reporting. Additionally, the state's numerous military bases and the cities around them will likely benefit from increased federal spending on defense and immigration enforcement. Again, I mentioned that I'm going to be speaking with Emily Wu Pearson from WABE, her extensive series of reporting on Detained in America, the immigrant detention industry here in the state of Georgia. The town of Lumpkin ain't benefiting much from it. The county ain't like $600,000 out of $3.3 million that comes into the company that runs that facility. It's a drop in the bucket. Corporate headquarters are in Tennessee, by the way. Let's see. So, increased federal spending on defense and immigration enforcement. An expanded immigrant detention facility near Folkston, Georgia, which is expected to be the nation's largest, is also projected to create 400 new jobs in the area. Data centers are also expected to be a major source of growth in the upcoming year. Well, we've talked about data centers so much in the last few months, right? And Georgia Power consumers likely picking up the tab for a lot of that. According to one report, Georgia recently surpassed Virginia as the most active data center market in the nation. Though Georgia is expected to have a slightly brighter economic outlook than the U.S. at large, national trends around wage growth and consumer spending indicate that the country is experiencing a K-shaped economy, where high earners see their wealth and income rise, while lower earners struggle to keep pace with the rising cost of living. Mark Matthews, who will be my guest later in the show, said at this little gathering yesterday, across the board, lower-income households appear to be significantly more challenged right now than the rest of the economy. Maya Holman continues. As President Donald Trump wraps up the first year of his second term, his policies on tariffs and immigration are also beginning to make their impact on the national economy. Tariffs on imports are expected to settle at around 15% in 2026, which is 6 times higher than the rate at the beginning of 2025. The rate is not high enough to trigger a recession by itself, Chatterjee said, but elevated global tensions and economic uncertainty could slow growth, he said. Some companies may also choose to postpone hiring and other business decisions, quote, until trade policies stabilize and become more predictable. To which I would say it would help if we had someone with spines in Congress. If Democrats were to retake the House, for example, you wouldn't have gelatinous spine Mike Johnson as the Speaker of the House. You would have a Democrat as the Speaker of the House who might push back on the fact that tariffs are actually a congressional power and not an executive branch power. I don't know who knew that or didn't know that. Donald Trump, you thought would have known that. I think Mike Johnson is aware. I think Senator John Thune, Senate Majority Leader, is aware. But neither of them, because they're both Republicans and feckless at the immense weight and pressure that comes from a Donald Trump presidency, seem to have no interest in pushing back on that. Yeah, those trade policies could stabilize with a Congress willing to say, actually, tariffs are in our domain. Like, that's for us to do, not you. But they're not doing anything about it. This is why you see Republicans doing everything they can to try and mitigate what is likely to be a blue wave in 2026. Redistricting wherever they can. California doing its best to mitigate that. There's immense pressure now on Indiana Republicans, although there's a little bit of an independent streak in Indiana Republicans. Like, they're not dyed-in-the-wool MAGA Trumpists on this, and there is pushback. In fact, there was one Indiana state representative who said, you know what? This guy. He used the R word, and I've got a child that is learning disabled, and I'm tired of, okay, you know what? Good for you, man. Good for you. We've got a high-ranking Indiana legislator who isn't exactly sold on the concept either. I mean, we talked a lot about this on this show early on about this race to out-gerrymander each other. Gerrymandering is not just little d democratic, it's anti-representative. And at some point in time, we the people have to say, no, you know what? This ain't cool. I mean, I'm not cool with Illinois doing it. I'm not cool with California. I'm really not. Under any other circumstance, I would say, oh, come on, this is gross. But when it's to counteract grossness in states like Texas, who, by the way, may not have actually benefited from the gerrymander that they've drawn up. They may not benefit from it nearly as much as they think they will. I mean, we just flipped a Trump plus 12 district here in Georgia, and they've made, some safer districts a little more competitive in order to create some closer to competitive districts that used to be solid blue. They may wind up losing more seats than they thought they were going to in this gerrymander. But still, it comes down to us, you, me, we the people saying, this is taking away our power. Like, they're jockeying for who gets to take away our power the fastest. And what are we going to say? Hi, we like voting. We like having a say in this sort of thing. And you guys continue to argue over who gets to take it away fastest and hardest, depending on which state you're in. We don't like it, period. I said this when this began. This is a recipe for people storming the gates. It's bad enough that it happens every 10 years, but when you have a special circumstance, and Donald Trump is definitely a special circumstance to live through, trust me, the last 10 years have been something else. Then we have to ask ourselves, this isn't cool. This is not what our forefathers intended. Okay, I went off script there completely. Maya Holman's last paragraph in that piece. Trump's immigration policies could also lead to changes in the economy. Normally, immigrants help contribute to annual population growth, Matthews said. But under policies that have ramped up immigration enforcement and placed a new emphasis on, quote, self-deportation, 2026, he says, quote, could well be the first year in American history where we have a population decline.
Why can't we have some people from Norway, Sweden, just a few? Let us have a few.
I'll tell you why. Because they look at us as the country. So many of us are keeping our eye on what right now the Senate is or isn't trying to do to deal with the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Remember when the Democrats worked to keep the government shut down, they wanted this conversation to come up sooner than it did. And Republicans, since March, since the big, beautiful bill, like it, was finally signed into law in July, right? They were negotiating that bill in March. They signed it in July. All that time that went by, that the ACA subsidies were not an issue. And now all of a sudden, we've seen some special elections come up. Republicans realize, oh, God, this is going to affect affordability. This is going to affect household incomes. We better deal with this. But we can't give in to the Democrats because we don't negotiate with terrorists. Unless you're Donald Trump and you're negotiating with the Taliban to get out of Afghanistan, but that's another matter for another day. I'm trying to think who this was. Oh, yeah, Senator Roger Marshall from Kansas. Oh, with this revelation that he had about the Affordable Care Act.
I think the first step is, will the Democrats accept the work we're doing on fraud? And even today, the Democrats voted down my anti-fraud bill on this. Look, a third of the patients that are on Obamacare right now did not file a claim last year for health insurance in any way, shape, or form. So we think there's $25 billion of fraud. If we can't get past the fraud issue, it's going to be hard to go beyond this.
So I hate to tell the, I'm sure, pretty well-off senator that's kind of how insurance works. Like, we have to pay for it, and then the copays, the deductibles, et cetera, and so on, the doctor, like, those fees are so expensive that we'd rather not. Like, it's kind of like an emergency safety net. Like, we want the insurance in case something dire happens that we absolutely cannot avoid going to the hospital, overnight stays, et cetera, and so on. We don't want to get bankrupted by our health care industry. So we got the Affordable Care Act for these extreme emergencies, but that so many people didn't even file, that's not unusual. Like, how many times have those, like, I confess, I have like a couple of dings on my Mazda that I didn't even cause. Like, one happened in a parking lot while I wasn't even there. I come out and I'm like, what? But I'm certainly not going to go to State Farm and say, hey, this happened. Because, yeah, they're going to send me the money to fix the ding, but they're also going to jack my rates, and my rates have finally gotten to where they're really affordable. So that happens a lot. That happens a lot in the healthcare industry, too. You got folks who are like, I'm just going to suck it up, man. I can't afford that deductible, that copay, that office visit fee, yada, yada, yada. And then, go to file the insurance claim, and then you got to do that stuff in triplicate and proof of this and yada, yada, yada. Y'all, it's so much work to get that stuff done that most people are just like, you know what? I'd rather just lay in bed and wallow for a couple. Trust me, I've been doing that. Laying in bed and wallowing for a couple of days and just riding it out. It just sucks that's kind of the con that is health insurance, right? You pay for what you try your best to never have to use, and even when you need to use it, you avoid it because there'd be additional costs. Man, Republicans almost get it. They almost get it. Reminds me of this clip that I saw on social media. If you're on the X platform and you don't follow the Tennessee Holler, I mean, that's a lot of ifing there. But if you're on the X platform, do follow the Tennessee Holler. These folks are great. There was this interview done between Justin Canoe with the Tennessee Holler. He is the founder of the Tennessee Holler. Justin and former insurance executive Wendell Potter, who has famously flipped. Like, he used to be one of those insurance execs who used to spin a whole bunch of disinformation our way to tell us that, we needed the private healthcare insurance industry. Anyway, in this clip, you'll see where Barack Obama said he wanted a single payer and settled for the ACA. Trump said it too. Listen to this.
Better is good. We're not going to get to perfect. If you're telling me that the Affordable Care Act is going to insure 50 million people, do I think that's better than if we were starting from scratch and I could get a single payer plan instituted and get that through Congress and suddenly we had universal health care and we had taken the profit motive out of, do I think that would probably be a smarter way to do it? Absolutely. Since I can't do that, I don't have the votes for that. How about this?
Since I can't do that, how about this? Wendell, that's Barack Obama saying he wanted a single-payer universal health care system and had to settle for the ACA.
It is truthful. He was on record saying he supported a single-payer healthcare system. He did settle largely because of some of the people who were around him, like Rahm Emanuel and others, just said, you're not going to be able to get anything through. The industry is too powerful. And there's a lot of truth to that. I was in the industry during the early days of the Clinton administration when the Clintons were trying to do something bold on healthcare. And I was a part of the industry effort to make sure that didn't happen.
Didn't Trump say something sort of along those lines?
You did.
Everybody's got to be covered. This is an un-Republican thing for me to say.
Universal health care.
I am going to take care of everybody. I don't care if it costs me votes or not.
Who pays for it?
The government's going to pay for it, but we're going to save so much money on the other side.
Anyone who's a thinking politician knows that what we have now is stupid and wasteful, but we've got to do a lot of work to hold their candidates more accountable and to help them understand it, how to talk about this in ways that break through.
That's really the challenge. Forget about labels. Let's say tomorrow you woke up and you could go see a doctor when you get sick. You didn't have to worry about deductibles and copays and all that stuff. Would you prefer that? Keep it really simple. If you could change people's lives overnight, they would appreciate it forever. If the Democrats mess around and let Republicans figure this out, then they're going to be voting Republican forever.
You're exactly right.
Today, Americans spend more on healthcare than on groceries or housing. This is a crisis. Doing nothing is not a solution.
Yeah, and we were joking that just wait, some Democrat is going to come to defense of insurance companies.
That's what's going to happen. Exactly right. These skyrocketing premiums are another example and really highlighting the issue. I just think it's really important that people make this a part of their requirements for candidates that they get behind.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Well-meaning Democrats actually do care about people and want people to have health care. They're just so conditioned that this is not doable. That is the bubble that needs to get popped. No, we can do this. And honestly, we can't afford not to do this anymore.
And yet I feel like we're at a kid's birthday party, right? And the Republicans are that kid that's blindfolded. They've got the bat. They're swinging at the piñata. And man, they just keep grazing it. Oh, they feel it, right? They're grazing it. The piñata is Medicare for all. They're grazing it. Just what? Oh, I feel it. It's within reach. God, just hit the damn thing. Just hit the damn thing already. And I don't... I get where Jack and Wendell were like, oh, if Democrats let Republicans get away with taking credit, who gives a whatever, right? Like, first of all, I have the full faith and confidence in the Republican Party and in Donald Trump not to give in to something that Bernie Sanders has been clamoring for decades. They're just not going to do that. And I also have full faith and confidence that maybe this is just me being partisan. I really don't think there's going to be a Democrat who's going to step up and go, oh, but what about Blue Cross and Blue Shield? Listen, there may be a senator or two or House member in the Democratic Party who gets money from the health insurance industry. There ain't enough of them. Not enough of them to formulate some resistance to Medicare for all. If there's one thing I know about Democrats, by the way, it's that they are quiet supporters of things and then become loud supporters of things when it is inevitable they're going to come to fruition. Gay marriage, it comes to mind. Trust me, I'm a gay man. I know how Democrats were quietly supportive until they were like, oh, yeah, let me race to social media and post how proud I am to have staunchly been a supporter. Yeah, okay. It's the Ron Show. Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Back after this.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is the Ron Show.
Heard weekdays on Georgia Now, 4 to 6 p.m., 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. The replay, 8 to 10 a.m. or wherever you podcast. WABE's Emily Wu Pearson joins me, and you guys have been doing a lot of work covering immigrant detention, which is not a small industry for the counties that have these detention facilities. First of all, the prison industry is really good and tends to be focused in counties a lot like Stewart County, Georgia, where a lot of your reporting is focused on. Anyway, Emily Wu, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So it's kind of interesting as I poured through some of your work. Lumpkin, Georgia, Stewart County, intrinsically tied to detention facilities and immigrant detention. It's funny, like here in Atlanta, there's this back and forth conversation about how much money should be invested in like a new Fulton County jail versus finding ways to mitigate crime. In this case, immigration is a totally different animal because we're dealing with a population in this country where, I don't know, estimates are anywhere from the 7 to 20 million in population, but our economy very much depends on that immigrant population working here. And so public sentiment seems to have swung a little bit since the 2024 election with ICE raids and folks being dragged out of courtrooms where they're going about it the right way. And yet here you have Little Lumpkin, Georgia, Stewart County. You're talking to otherwise decent, friendly folks, but they're sort of tied to an industry that, I don't know, some people outside of their community might look at and think, oh, this is evil doing.
Right. It's an interesting contrast, especially when you're looking at how Stewart County has voted overall in the history of the entire county. That part of the state is has a high population of Black women, and Black women have historically in Georgia voted Democratic. And so when you look at the history of how Stewart County votes, I think there's only been two, if I recall correctly, only two presidents that they did not vote for a Democrat in those instances. And yet you have kind of this tension, this contrasting idea of you have this pretty Democratic voting leaning county, but the detention center is one of the top employers in addition to the school system in the county. And the people who are working at the detention center are largely these Black women who live in the area. You find that it's one of the jobs you can get in the area. There's not a lot of industry there.
Right.
And people oftentimes too will, Mac Moy, the county manager of Stewart County, he told me when the Core Civic, the private prison company that runs Stewart Detention Center, when it opened up the immigration facility, it has certain guidelines, right? You have to have a GED or a high school diploma and a couple of other, no criminal background, et cetera, to get a job there. And these prerequisites encouraged people in the county to go and finish high school. And for the first time, the county had astronomical, near perfect high school graduation rates. And then people started to realize, oh, well, with a high school diploma or with a GED, I can actually get a better job in Columbus. I can get a better job in Americus. I can move to somewhere where there's a little bit more economic mobility than just the detention center, and this is the only job. And then there's no other industry here. So when you look around the country, you see a lot of rural towns that have similar issues where you have not a lot of industry, you have a detention center, and a lot of the folks in the area end up working in this ecosystem that doesn't necessarily get them to greater economic pastures.
I guess the other problem that I noted that you covered at great length is just how remote this place is, and that for attorneys to represent those who are in these detention facilities, it's quite a trek. I mean, it's not like Lumpkin has an array of hotels off the interstate or anything like that for them to stay at. I mean, this is, and a lot of this work is pro bono. This isn't. It's a stretch. It's a stretch for folks to actually do their work to represent these folks.
Yeah, it's a hard place to get to. It's a hard place to stay at. There's no Airbnb. There's no motels. There's no hotels. There's like rural camping sites for hunting and fishing sites, but there's really nothing there if you want to stay and visit somebody at the detention center. And there are a couple of groups, a couple being exactly two that I spoke to, who have worked to try to create spaces for families or loved ones or even attorneys visiting. One is El Refugio, which is a really well-known group. They have a hospitality house in downtown Lumpkin where people come from all over the country and they can stay. They're open on the weekends when they're trying to visit family and loved ones. But there used to be a branch of the Southern Poverty Law Center down in Lumpkin, and they had an initiative called the Southeastern Immigrant Freedom Initiative, or the Southeast Immigrant Freedom Initiative. And they had a couple of attorneys who were working on a pro bono basis living in Lumpkin in a double wide, and they had an office and a place to stay. And sometimes attorneys could come and crash there for the night or use that as a landing spot, but there's not the resources. There's not a library. So if you're an attorney coming and you need to stop and print something out, or if you need to do a quick search, you have to be completely prepared before you come in. And so attorneys are driving oftentimes from Atlanta. Wow. It's a 2.5 hour drive. Mm-hmm. And then when you are actually in immigration court, I got to sit into immigration court. They give you a brochure as an immigrant that says, here are some options for pro bono attorneys. You can obtain a paid attorney, but in immigration court, because it's a civil issue, unlike criminal court, you are not guaranteed an attorney. So if you are lucky enough, yeah, I know. And it surprised me when I first started on this beat too, with how in immigration court, there's no right to an attorney. You are just going through the proceedings on your own. And so if you are lucky enough to get an attorney, oftentimes you have to pay. If you're lucky enough to get a pro bono attorney, then this brings me to this list in this brochure. The pro bono attorneys on the list when I went, one was in Atlanta, one was in Tallahassee, and one was in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So if you're at Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin, Georgia, and you are also, an immigrant in detention, and you don't necessarily have money to pay to call an attorney, and you don't have maybe a lot of English skill, or you don't have access to the internet to Google immigration attorneys, you're kind of on your own.
Is the pamphlet at least bilingual or multilingual?
It was in English and Spanish.
Okay.
Yes, so it was in both.
We're with Emily Wu Pearson, Immigration and Communities reporter at WABE. Their series, Detained in Georgia, covering the immigration and customs enforcement detainees and the cottage industry that has developed in some of these remote areas like Lumpkin, Georgia, Stewart County, where it seems as if, in some respects, having these facilities in a town like Lumpkin is good for the community. But actually, you did some reporting that shows that of all the money being spent on the detention facilities, millions are being made, but they go to these companies operating the facilities, and these towns and counties see very little of it.
Yeah. When I first started reporting this story, I went into it thinking, surely Lumpkin is nice.
Right.
Like, there's people, like, I don't know, the housing industry is booming, and grocery store, Publix or whatever. But, and I think I went into it with the assumption that Lumpkin would be well served, because when earlier this year, Folkestone Ice Processing Center across the other part of the state near Brunswick, Georgia, they renewed their contract with ICE to increase the amount of people they can detain. And Buddy Carter, he was really effusive about how many jobs it would bring to the area and how it would be an economic boom. And so I went into it thinking like, oh, it makes sense. A big business is expanding, an economic boom. Like, I can see how that works. But then when I was looking at the numbers in Lumpkin, which the detention center has been there since, actually the facility has been there since before ICE existed. It was a prospecting initiative by Core Civic. Before it was Core Civic, it was they wanted to build a federal prison in the area, but the federal government wasn't interested in opening a federal prison. So they had this facility that just went unopened, and until Immigration and Customs Enforcement was developed, and then there was initiatives to move immigrants through a detention system. But all of that is to when I look at the numbers, millions, it's an Office of Inspector General report through the Department of Homeland Security found that at least $3.3 million goes to Stewart Detention Center a month.
Wow.
To operate the facility. A month, yeah. And the way it works is the federal government pays for a minimum census of people they can detain, and they pay per person. And so I think that Stewart Detention Center is contracted to hold something like 1,700 or 1,800 people per month, per day. And Stewart Detention Center receives an amount per person per day. And whether or not they have that number of people, if they have fewer, they still make that money. If they have more, then they make more. So during the Biden administration, when there were not as many people in detention, and especially when COVID-19 was going through the detention facilities and people were being released to prevent the spread of COVID, even though there weren't maximum numbers in the detention centers, the facilities were still making the maximum amount of the daily pay, because that was a contract. So out of that $33 million per month that the detention center gets, the county, Stewart County, on average per year only gets about $600,000 in taxes and fees.
How many people does this facility employ?
So Core Civic said that they employ around 400 employees.
Okay.
They can employ around 400 employees. That doesn't include necessarily the medical staff that they contract out and the different types of vendors that they have. But when I was talking to Mac Moy, the county manager, so Moy, he was a really awesome person to talk to, because he is a fifth generation Stewart Countyan.
Wow.
His son, lives there. His grandson lives there. They have the family farm that they've had for forever. And they just know Stewart County. Like, his dad was crucial in a lot of different historical events. His grandfather, there were a lot of different aspects of his life that are integrated into the Stewart County history.
Right.
So he was telling, and he just, you live in a small town, you just kind of know people. So he was telling me on his rough estimate, there were no more than 90 people working at the detention facility who live in Stewart County.
Oh,
and yeah, and he said a couple of things contribute to that. Part of it is when people started graduating from high school and getting their diplomas or getting their GEDs, they were able to leave. For the first time, they realized I could get a better job. And so there was some brain drain. But then some of it is, he said, housing is not available. There's not really apartment complexes in Lumpkin. There's not really that for a starter home. A lot of the houses are either really historic established houses, or people are already living in them. And so a house doesn't go on market very often. And he's been working really hard with the state to figure out how to combat housing affordability issues in rural communities.
But it also can't help. I saw you reporting that the nearest hospital is in Alabama, 25 miles away. The only retail that you have in Lumpkin is a Family Dollar, a Dollar Tree, and a Dollar General. Listen, I know a lot of towns in and around Georgia that are just like that. They're just not desirable places to live. And it's through no fault of the people. It's just that nobody wants to live where there's substandard housing or not enough to choose from, and you're sometimes doubling up on housing. And your grocery store is the Dollar General. No disrespect to Dollar General, but that ain't a grocery store. And a 35, 40-minute drive to a hospital in another state, again, this just is not desirable.
Right. It's hard to get the care that you need. And I spoke to some residents, and one woman in particular, Alice Hamilton, she mentioned to me that for the options that you have, like the groomer that she prefers is in a different town, the hairdresser that she likes is in a different town. And, if she wants to buy fabric to make a quilt, it's again in a different town. And so even so like you said, you have the Family Dollar, but if you want, a fresh loaf of bread, right, you can't really get it there.
Yeah, for sure. We are with Emily Wu Pearson, NPR, PBS Atlanta affiliate WABE. She is their immigration and communities reporter. She's done a series of stories, Detained in Georgia, focusing on the immigrant detention facilities in rural Georgia. We'll continue that conversation when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. I have enjoyed reading up on the various perspectives, the impacts that immigrant detention facilities have on rural communities like Lumpkin, Georgia and Stewart County, thanks to Emily Wu Pearson's work at WABE. Her series Detained in Georgia at WABE.org. I'll include in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Not just the impact that it has on the community, its citizens, its employees, but also, of course, the immigrants and the volunteer organizations that work to somehow soften the blow of detention, if not deportation. Now, this is a blue county in that red sea of southwest Georgia, thanks to the African-American female vote, which begs the question. Talk to me a little bit, if you can, about the sentiment on the ground there in Lumpkin and Stewart County when it comes to the change in policy at the top here with ICE and their ramping up of enforcement, detention, et cetera, and so on. What you mentioned that this is a routinely blue county with African-American women leading the charge there. What is the sentiment on the ground there?
It's a good question. When I was in Lumpkin, I spent a couple of hours each day walking around looking to talk to folks, and there were not really a lot of people out and about. When I was able to chat with people like Alice Hamilton, Alice is an older white woman, and she mentioned that this detention center feels really removed from the day-to-day in Lumpkin, and that people in the community don't necessarily see any kind of personal drive to interact with it. And I think I asked because I asked it in context of, in Atlanta, I end up covering a lot of protests against the detention centers.
Right, but yeah. Is there any element of that in Lumpkin?
People go to Lumpkin to protest the detention center, but it's not often organic from Lumpkin protest against the detention center. So what I found, and then I wasn't, CoreCivic and ICE, both of them did not let me interview any of the people who work at the detention center, but so I don't really have a lot of insight as to the sentiment of the guards.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the protests that happen about Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin end up coming from people who come down from Atlanta or Athens and protest. Very, very rarely have I seen something come from a Lumpkin community member as a protest against the detention center.
We're with Emily Wu Pearson from WABE. She, of course, covers their immigration and communities beat. We're talking about the series that they've done here called Detained in Georgia, and she's focusing a lot on rural Stewart County, Georgia, near the Alabama state line, Lumpkin, Georgia there. The industry that is the immigrant detention facility there. However, the county, the city, they don't see a whole lot of benefit from it fiscally anyway. Even the jobs that are there, it sounds like 90 of the 400 jobs go to local individuals. Most folks who are employed at this prison aren't even there anymore. Talk to me a little bit more, if you will, about the, you said there's very little element of protest, sometimes folks coming in from other parts of the state or the country. What about the volunteer initiative that there's a healthy volunteer community that is looking out for immigrants in detention? We talked about the pro bono attorneys, et cetera, and so on. And you mentioned the Southern Poverty Law Center, I think, but any other organizations that are showing up occasionally to advocate for those in detention?
Yeah, there are a couple of groups who spend their time trying to help families navigate how to help their loved ones who are in detention. Yeah. So El Refugio has a hospitality house where you can stay if you're trying to visit somebody in detention. And then they do a lot of other type of outreach too. So if you are in detention and you just want to see a human face that's not another detainee or a guard, you can ask somebody, a volunteer from El Refugio, to come and visit just to chat, to have some kind of outside contact. They also help provide things like when you're being deported, you are allowed to have one piece of luggage, a backpack that has, I think it's 2 pairs of clean shirts, a pair of clean pants, those kinds of things. And El Refugio helps organize getting those to detainees. Okay. There's another organization in the area. So folks will go from all over, kind of everywhere, to go to El Refugio to volunteer. Not just Georgia, but around the country. And people are there every weekend. But then I also met with folks at this place called Koinonia Farm, which is an intentional Christian community in Americus, which is about an hour away from the detention center. And Koinonia was really interesting because it existed well before the detention center was there and exists in a different context. It doesn't exist solely to serve people who are in detention. Koinonia Farm started in the 40s as a place to make racial reconciliation happen in the Jim Crow South.
I got you.
So it was one of the first, if not the first place in this part of Georgia where Black folks and white folks lived together and worked together and shared. They have the common purse, and it's in the Christian values of, love thy neighbor as thyself. We have a common purpose, and they, grow their own food. They have, education resources, that kind of stuff. And so that farm has a long history of different types of justice work, I would say.
Okay.
And it's all rooted in the Christian faith. And so I got to meet people who live there and work there, and the way they help people at the detention center is similar. They also do like a backpack ministry where they get people stuff they need if they're being deported, but they have provided a landing space for people because they have housing on the farm, and they have a way to help people get work almost. If you are getting out of detention and you don't necessarily have a place to live, or you don't necessarily have a decision on your court case, for example, and you need to come back to Stewart Detention Center because the court is attached to it and it's only an hour away, they have let people live there on the farm and, help out. They have a mature pecan grove, and they have, all of the things that you can do at a farm, all that kind of work. People can live there and get their legs under them for a little bit after they have been released from detention too. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just found that online. I'll make sure I include that in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. You have done some extensive work on this story, or on this angle of a national story, a more human element to it. I'll make sure we include the links to your series, Detained in Georgia, from WABD.org, in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Emily Wu Pearson, thank you so much for doing the work, and thank you so much for taking some time to join me today to expound on it a little bit.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
She and I both, by the way, just kind of struggling with whatever is going around. I happen to think now more than ever that I got the flu from somebody, but I promise you, I feel like I've turned a corner. I feel 1,000% better today. It might have been the 11 hours sleep. Anyway, hour number 1 of the Books on the Ron Show. Thank you so much for listening. Georgia Now, 4 to 6 p.m. weekdays, 11 p.m. Progressive Voice via TuneIn. The replay 8 to 10 a.m. on Georgia Now, or wherever you podcast. Show notes at ronshowatl.com.